Today, I'm setting myself a goal, learning how to hang 10 switch in one session. Now, this is something I've never focused on before. It's absolutely brand new, and I think it's got to be interesting to say the least and to see how it goes. I think there's going to be a lot of good takeaways in terms of the learning process and how to push through sticking points, and I think this will be really applicable to your own surfing. So I'm really excited to show you guys how this goes. Let's get into it. And just before we get into it as well, the pre-orders for the Glide Surf Collective product are ending today. If you did want to join the Glide and support the channel, then this is a great way to do so. If you'd like to, you can check out the links below. Let's get into the video.
So I was super excited to get along with this experiment today. Again, I had worked on my switch stance before, but nothing quite like the hang 10, more around cross stepping and a little bit of nose riding. So I was really excited to see what barriers might pop up for me in my surfing and what I'll need to overcome and how do I go about navigating through these. Couldn't wait to see how it went. So the first wave here I think shows my baseline in switch stance quite well, I think. I was cross-stepping okay, my positioning and manoeuvring of the board isn't as good as my forehand, and I think this is shown well by my start of the wave where I'm staying pretty low and not engaging my rail early enough. But something I had previously worked on in switch is poking my left foot forward towards the nose and not putting weight onto the left foot, which I was happy with here. No hang 10 though. So for wave 2, here you can see where a lot of the difficulties are. Notice how my control of the board positioning leading into the nose ride is all off, where I drift far too high, and as we enter the hang 10 position, I just lose it because the standing position isn't stable. This was a really good early reality check that I really need to work on to get this right.
And for wave 3 here, I do like my patience here, but just watch what happens next.
As I eye off the section ahead of me, I feel like my positioning is pretty good. I enter the hang 10, but again, not being used to the positioning, I instantly come back into the goofy stance to come back. And as I do this, I remember my legs getting caught together on the way back, and this led to this. So after a few attempts here, I'm finding my way to the nose, but there are a few things that were getting in my way. The positioning and just the awkward sort of feeling in the natural stance or the switch stance was something that was definitely holding me back. But more importantly, my ability to come back from the nose. This means that I'm essentially nose diving a lot because I'm unable to come back when I need to. And it also decreases my confidence to be able to go to the nose in the first place because there's a higher risk of falling. So this is something I needed to get on top of. Now, what I decided to do on this next wave is just to isolate things a little bit more and actually use my normal stance, so the goofy stance, to enter and exit the nose. And just to come into the switch stance solely for the nose ride positioning. As you can see, although clunky, I actually got 2 hang 10s here. Positioning was better on the wave, which led me to think how my decreased ability to adjust my position on the wave in the switch stance also seemed to influence the overall quality and success of my hang 10s. On this wave, positioning in my normal stance, I could get right in the pocket. And if you look at a lot of these initial waves, I'm the opposite in the natural position. Instead, out on the shoulder to escape the critical part of the wave, which is less balanced, but a more ideal position for the hang 10 as we all know. Here, I use the step and reset method to maintain balance walking to the nose, but still, the same thing happens at the end. And with this one, another small success, but with the normal stance to position and coming back in my normal stance as well. And for this one here, although I fall, I feel like it's better with regards to the positioning, but still I just can't seem to hold the position and balance on the nose, dropping too low and not utilising that inside rail enough, therefore nose diving. And after this one, I decided to come in and have a bit of a rethink of how I was doing things. I ride it all the way through, however with very little commitment to any sort of hanging 10, and this was due to poor positioning again and just overall hesitation. So I did decide to come in at this point and just have a bit of a rethink about what I was doing and how I was going. Again, I'd made and managed to get to the hang 10 a couple of times, but again, utilizing the goofy stance or my normal stance to be able to get there and come back. And so there were also some key things that I was noticing I was avoiding. Firstly, I was avoiding the critical section of the wave, and we know that this is what we need for the hang 10s. Another thing I did notice is I wasn't really committing my weight forwards. I was so hesitant and just in this unbalanced position on the hang 10, and I needed to figure that out as well. We discussed on the beach what I should do. First thing is learning something new, you've always got to persist, and it's really useful to have those sessions even when you're failing or not doing it quite as well as you would like to make sure you go back out there and continue, because this is where we're really going to notice those benefits, and this is where we usually stop. And if we stop there, then we're not going to see that success or the progress that we could make. So it's really important to keep on going. And again, coming back to making it okay to fall. So just committing and making sure that you're pushing through hesitation. The best way to push through hesitation is just to commit wholeheartedly and make it okay to fall. So that was something I was willing to do as well. Let's see how we go. And first wave back out there, I think I managed to get my commitment to leaning forwards on the nose. And as I did this, something actually clicked. It seemed that being a goofy footer, a lot of my weight was coming onto my left foot, which took weight off the inside rail, which would be on the right foot, and actually led me to falling off balance and needing to switch myself around to the normal goofy position in order to maintain my balance. This was a really interesting insight I'd had after this wave, and I was really eager to rectify it. And with all of the mistakes that I'd made so far, things were slowly starting to change. So let's take a look at this here. Here, you can notice I'm much more comfortable with the stance, looking much squarer and committed as I threw myself into the position where I was leaning forwards and holding weight over the right foot, instead of being so lopsided with all of my weight on the outside rail, this being the left foot where I'm used to holding my weight. And this made the world of difference. In the end though, for me, the whole session came down to this wave here, where I just couldn't believe I really pulled it off. So let's watch through it first. There was a lot that went right here for me, and I was beyond stoked. Firstly, I committed to the same stance and nose ride positioning that we just spoken about. But on top of that, I secured a really stable but critical nose ride position at the start of the wave, and this might help you guys out as well. But a meaningful breakthrough here is that being able to read the critical section ahead of you is crucial. You can position high and drop into the wave into the steep section from the nose, rather than having to cross step forwards to the nose in the fast critical section. So for this, patience and being able to read the wave are two crucial elements to the success of hanging 10 overall. From here, my confidence was up, with all my attention going towards reading the critical section early and positioning high so I could drop into the critical section on the nose and then completing the same stance and positioning that we'd previously discussed. Something I also haven't mentioned here as well is what I did to improve my cross step back. Here, as we spoke about on the beach, commitment to a big step back was key. Not being worried about falling, making falling acceptable, and just committing to a big step back. What I found I had been doing is a hesitant step, which was making the step far too small and really, really rigid. But again, to push through hesitation, we need to make sure we're committing to something. And so committing to the big step back so that I was far enough back on the board not to nosedive, this helped to rewire those instincts of hesitation to finally break through with this as well. As a general rule for learning something new, I find that big intentional movements are so good at rewiring your baseline, from a hesitant approach to a committed approach. I can't recommend this enough. And once I'd found what was working, the aim was just to rinse and repeat the same cues. This is where the repetition is super important, and once we know we've found some success with how we're doing something, it's just about making it feel more and more natural, rinse and repeat, get the repetitions in as much as possible. So overall, I think this was a really eye-opening experience. Again, I probably haven't pushed myself to learn something absolutely new in longboarding for a fair while. I do it occasionally, but a lot of the time for myself, it is about how I can progress my surfing on top of the things that I'm already doing. So this was really, really cool. It was also good to be able to think about my usual cues for coaching and how I went about doing that myself, and was it helping? And I definitely think the key takeaways for something like this today were making sure that I'm committing. Commitment is essentially the absolute opposite of hesitation. So if we can commit to doing something, making falling acceptable, I think that's really, really important. Another thing that we need to discuss here is the fact that the conditions were really, really suitable. And I did want to wait for a day that the point was working properly so that I could get lots of repetitions in for the hang 10s. If we're doing this on a not so favourable day, like the conditions we had last week at the beach break, then it would be pretty tricky, and I don't think I would have had the same success. So being able to put that on rinse and repeat, again, like I spoke about at the end there, is a really, really important part of this, and something that I think worked really, really well for me today. The other thing that I took as a really good takeaway for hanging 10 in general, which I think you guys can use as well, is I found the easiest way to approach the nose is being able to read the section ahead of you, see where it's going to become nice and critical and steep, and then position yourself high on the wave before you get into the critical section. And then once you're high on the wave, cross-stepping to the hang 10 and allowing yourself to drop in from above into the critical section. It's way too difficult, especially if you're switching your stance or just learning to cross-step in general. It's very unbalancing. So cross-stepping in the critical section is super, super tricky. And essentially for a hang 10, we do want to be nice and high in the wave for the most part, unless we're right underneath the pocket, which I certainly wasn't getting a lot of today. But we do want to be nice and high, and I think that allows us to get that lift underneath the nose, and it can be just a really good way to position yourself. So I think that's a good little takeaway that you guys can use as well.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Really appreciate the support. If you're interested in the Glide product, feel free to check out the links below. We'll catch you on the next one.